4 months ago, I decided to completely stop using Anki for language learning. And even though I still continue to use Anki every day for things like astronomy, chemistry, geography, some Latin and Greek roots, some miscellaneous stuff on Wikipedia, and quotes from books, I specifically decided to not use Anki for language learning about 4 months ago. And the reason for doing this was that it was disrupting the flow of my immersion too much. On top of looking up new words when I was listening to or reading things, the tedious process of copying and pasting the word, copying and pasting the definition, then the example sentence, and then like the paragraph in which I found the word, it was taking too much time, and it was actually kind of making me a little bit sad. I wanted to get more joy out of the experience of consuming the content and not necessarily focus on this side thing of Anki. The second reason why I stopped using Anki was because I was feeling that I wasn't actually using my memory to its fullest extent. Whenever I was, immersing, and whenever I created new cards with Anki, I would blindly copy the text or copy the new word, put it into an Anki card, but I wouldn't actually try to memorize it on the spot. I thought that, Anki will just slam it into my head or slam it into my memory later. So why should I actually engage myself with the content and try to understand the material right now? So I felt that by getting rid of Anki, it was going to make my memory better, since I wouldn't have to rely on this external source of memory. I could get better at memorizing things myself instead of using this other program to help me memorize things. Those are the two biggest reasons. And over the past 4 months, I've thought and reflected during the summer, and I decided that I am going to come back to using Anki for language learning. But there's a big twist. Things aren't going to be the same. So I guess my new premise for language learning with Anki is I have to not disrupt the flow of immersion because I want to get experience out of consuming the content that I enjoy. So I'm only returning for Spanish and Mandarin. I'm not doing anything for Korean just yet. For Mandarin, for example, how can I learn Mandarin using Anki without disrupting the flow of my experience? Well, of course, it's by using a pre-made deck. If I use a pre-made deck that I downloaded from somewhere else, I don't have to create any of the cards, which means that I'm not disrupting the flow of my immersion since I'm not creating any of the cards. Thankfully, I already have a pre-made deck on my computer. This is a Chengyu deck. In Mandarin, Chengyu are 4-character long idioms, and there's a lot of them to memorize. And thankfully, I had this deck on my computer in the past. And currently, make sure I stay on track here. I made a video about this in the past where I actually stopped using this deck. And that was primarily because I was making it too hard on myself by trying to memorize multiple things at once. So let's say for a single card, I was trying to memorize multiple things at once by memorizing, of course, the word itself, but also if there are any new words in the definition, I would try to memorize those as well. And I was making things too hard on myself. I should only memorize one thing at a time. So whenever I come across a definition where I don't understand what it's saying, or there's any word where I don't know the meaning, then I suspend it and go to the next card. That card isn't worth it. I can come back to it later. I just want to focus on the definitions that I do understand. I'm not trying to learn multiple things at once. And the second thing is that I'm only, for now, doing cards that have example sentences. For some reason, some cards in this deck have example sentences and others don't. You can see by Li Ju right here. And I've flagged all of the cards that have example sentences green. So like all of these have Li Ju. But for some reason, like this card doesn't have an example sentence. I don't know why this deck, the author of this deck did this. But yeah, I'm only going to be learning cards that have example sentences on them, because it's not enough to just understand the word and recognize it in context. It's also important to know how to use it. Maybe this is like a Mandarin specific thing, because it's kind of hard to know how to use the idiom. Like, is it a standalone phrase? Are you supposed to use it as an adjective or a verb? It's kind of hard to tell. So that's why the example sentence is very important. And as I said before, I've flagged all of the cards green that have example sentences. Unfortunately, I accidentally did a couple of cards that don't have example sentences. I front loaded all of the cards that did have example sentences, but for some reason some of the cards that didn't have example sentences appeared. But anyway, I'll keep those. So yeah, this is what I'm going to do for now. And something that I was doing in the past, specifically for this deck, is whenever I found an idiom when I was listening or reading, I would look up this deck. Well, let me explain it this way. Instead of creating a card myself, what I would do is, whenever I found an idiom in my immersion, I would look up this deck and try to search up if this card actually existed. And then I would send it to the very front so that it would be the first one that shows up the next day. But that's technically breaking the flow of immersion. So I'm not going to be doing that anymore. It's just I suspended all the cards that don't have example sentences, and I'm suspending all the cards where I do not understand the monolingual definition right then and there. So that's my new criteria. And I'm doing one card a day for this deck. I've made the mistake in the past of trying to do too much at once. It's easy to say, well, I'm just going to do just 5 cards a day, or just 10. That can't be so bad. But then it piles up really fast. So I'm not going to make that mistake. I probably will increase this in the future to maybe 3 or 4. But for now, I'll keep it at 1 for now. So for Mandarin, sorry, not for Mandarin, for Spanish, something that I'm doing is I'm really combining the language with another hobby of mine. So I talked about this in the past. One of my hobbies that I like doing in my free time is looking up quotes from random books and making close cards out of them. So there's this website called Goodreads, which is a book review website. But for every book, people can submit their own, their favorite quotes, their favorite parts of the book. And it's all free. That's what I love about it. And each of them, they're all sorted by likes. So I love going through these and making close cards out of them. Like, for example, this isn't necessarily from a book. Well, maybe it was, but I make close cards out of these quotes and these excerpts from books. And what close is you can basically create multiple cards out of a single card. You can hide certain text. Actually, I'm probably explaining it in the worst way possible. You can hide text when you're looking at the card, but when you flip it over, it shows the text. And I try to make my closed selections as big as possible. But anyway, this hobby of looking up random quotes and pieces of text from books and making closed cards out of them is one of my great hobbies of mine, and I really enjoy it. So I thought, why not do this, but in Spanish? And it really makes sense, because one of the easiest ways to learn a language, one of the most painless ways to learn a language, is just to do one of your hobbies, anything that you enjoy doing, but just do it in the language that you're learning instead of in your native language. And unfortunately, Goodreads doesn't have that many Spanish quotes from books. But thankfully, I was looking around and I found this one site called Proverbia. And I guess it has a list of authors here, and each author has a quote here. And I've been going through those and doing the exact same thing of creating close cards. So and I'm putting these quotes in the quote deck, not necessarily in a specific Spanish deck. So for example, if you search up, I put a specific tag on these. Yeah, like for example, this one. I'm not learning any new words through this technique because the point isn't to learn any new words. I'm learning these for the idea. Any quote that makes me say, oh, I never thought of that before, or that's a great way of putting it, or I never knew that before. That's the quote that I put into here. And I'm not really learning new vocabulary. The point of this isn't to learn vocabulary. Like look at this sentence. I'm not learning anything new from that. The purpose of this isn't for the vocabulary, it's for the ideas. I use the exact same criteria for the Spanish learning as I do for my English quotes. Let's see, is that everything I wanted to talk about? I have a list here that I'm going through. So I talked about Mandarin and I talked about Spanish. So I think that's everything I wanted to say. Oh, an additional thing is that even though I'm technically creating cards, I'm technically breaking the flow of immersion, but I actually don't think so because my original hobby, the hobby itself, involved creating these Anki cards. So even though I'm technically making Anki cards, I don't really consider it to be breaking the flow of immersion because it was already part of the original hobby in the first place. So yeah, those are the two ways that I've come back to language learning for, we'll come back to using Anki for language learning. Maybe I'll do Korean in the future, but if I did do Korean, it would only have to be like a pre-made deck. I'm done with looking up new words, or I'm done with creating my own cards for my immersion. I'm only going to do pre-made decks, or I guess this, which just happens to involve Anki card creation, so it doesn't really count. But yeah, that's my new decision. So that's everything I want to talk about. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.